Morning.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for coming out on the sunny morning. Today, Fianna Fáil have published a private member's motion calling on the government to retain post office services in the 159 villages where postmasters and postmistresses have indicated a willingness to retire. We're concerned that An Post, and particularly the government, are using this decision by 159 postmasters and postmistresses to retire as a ruse for the closure of the elimination of post office services in those villages. These post offices currently provide a very important public service to those people who use the post office. In many cases, it's elderly and vulnerable people who are collecting their social welfare payments and indeed carrying out other transactions. The removal of the services from the village, we believe, will put an intolerable burden on the lives of those people. The most vulnerable, those who don't have access to private transport, and as you well know, public transport is very scarce in these communities. So for that reason, we believe that An Post, together with the government, need to develop a new model of the delivery of post office services in each of those villages. Put it in place immediately to ensure the preservation and protection of those villages. As you know, the services delivered at post offices are an important part of the ecosystem that is those villages. And there are other businesses that depend on the services of the post office, and we believe that a domino effect can take place here. If the post office is closed, it has the potential to have a negative impact, particularly on smaller shops and other businesses in the vicinity. We'll be putting that motion to the Dáil at the earliest possible opportunity on our return, and we will hope for the support, particularly of those members of the Fine Gael party who have expressed their outrage at the decision by An Post to close many of these post offices, albeit particularly in the backyards of some of those Fine Gael TDs. So any questions you have?
Post maintain that some of those post offices, the 159, are not viable in the long term. Yeah. What's Fianna Fáil's alternative then? Are you talking about a compulsory funding situation from the state, or what else are you thinking of?
Well, we don't believe that an essential public service should be viewed in terms of profit and loss. We believe that the viability of the villages and the areas and the people around it is more important, and as such we've put forward a proposal whereby a public service obligation would be placed on An Post, and as part of that the state would on an annual basis agree a subvention between the state and An Post to protect and preserve that service. There's nothing particularly new here. The state already does that in relation to the provision of public transport services. As you know, there's a very significant transfer every year to the CIE group of companies that supports non-commercially viable routes provided by the three companies across the state.
How much would it cost and where to get the money from?
We estimate about 8 million. As you know, Danny, it's a growing economy, and if we can't find 8 million to protect and preserve the rural services, well then I think it speaks a lot of the society that we want to look into the future. You've got to look at this against a backdrop of where the government and its predecessor, and indeed the one before that, has been promising the rollout of rural broadband services since 2012, and it's still a promise. And with the kind of shenanigans that we have seen over the last number of months in relation to that particular contract, I don't think there's any confidence amongst the communities that I'm talking to or my colleagues are talking to about seeing that service being rolled out anytime soon. I think it's a distortion of the truth. The facts of the matter are An Post is a commercial semi-state company. It has to operate on a profit and loss scenario. So therefore, if the return from these offices is not sufficient to keep the company afloat, well then An Post will argue that it's their duty to make ends meet, and they close these offices. It is for the state, and in particular for the government, to step in and ensure that these services are maintained, and I believe the way to do that is through a direct transfer from Central Exchequer to An Post to deliver an important service. We do it in so many other ways. All the other key essential state services, whether they be hospitals, community centres, nurses, doctors, guards, we pay from Central Exchequer. There's no reason why a subvention couldn't be put in place, a relatively small subvention in overall terms, to protect and preserve these rural communities.
Your party leader said yesterday he expects these issues to become part of the budget negotiations. Can you tell us a little bit about what you'll be bringing to the table on that point? And also the conference supply is up for renewal, as we know. Taoiseach wants that conversation before the budget. He put a letter to the party on Friday. What is your answer to that?
Well, for sure we will raise this in the context of the budget discussions. What we would hope, obviously, is that Minister O'Loughlin and his department will come forward with a proposal, and we will certainly support that proposal in our budget discussions and negotiations through our finance team, and those discussions will begin tomorrow. You raised the issue about a letter between the Taoiseach and a party leader. It's another distraction by the Taoiseach. He's been talking to you and many others about it over the last number of weeks. From my point of view, it would appear to be just a distraction away from the real issues, which is focusing on the budget. The Taoiseach wants to talk about confidence in supply while we're just beginning a discussion about the budget. You will recall the confidence in supply arrangement has a very straightforward timeline. We have signed up to negotiating and delivering 3 budgets, and the sequence is then, when that has been completed, when a budget's in place, when there's financial security and fiscal confidence in place, then we begin a discussion about a review of the confidence in supply and whether or not we can agree an extension or a renegotiation of that. That will happen in due course. That was set out 3 years ago. The Taoiseach signed up to that. He's a signatory to it, so he's well aware of the sequencing that has been provided for. And it's our expectation now that all of you good people are not going to be distracted by that particular effort by him to change the focus away from the really important issues which will form part of the budget discussions, which are about the housing crisis which we face, about the crisis in our health service, about the decline in rural services, namely on post and broadband, and all those other issues that people want to talk about, that I have had an opportunity and my colleagues have had an opportunity to meet with our constituents over the summer. These are the important issues they're talking about, not about bringing forward or changing the sequencing of an agreement that was in place now for almost 3 years.
Timmy, could you say that Brexit wasn't there when that agreement was signed, and given the instability that inevitably poses, is there not a benefit to begin the chat at least now on extending the deal?
Micheál, it's very clear. The agreement makes provision for all of this. Let's address the budget, and through the budget there will be issues in relation to Brexit and the impact that will have on the economy. So let's get some fiscal security in place here. Let's agree the important issues and the funding of the state for the next 12 months. And when that's out of the way, when that fiscal confidence is in place, then let's deal with the political issues about whether or not we're going to have an election, or when it's going to take place, or what the next set of priorities will be. There's an ongoing dialogue about Brexit. Our party leader is today meeting with Michel Barnier in Brussels to address, his concerns and to understand from Michel Barnier where the discussions are at. So we're fully engaged in all of that. The Taoiseach knows we're fully engaged on that. He's attempting to distract from the really important issues that will form part of the budget discussions. He's attempting to use it as a ruse to get you talking about elections and many other things, and I'm sure you will treat it with the normal way that you do these flying of kites and let it go with the wind, if you would.
In relation to the budget on housing, the proposal to incentivise landlords to sign long-term leases with tenants has been given a guarded welcome, but with a nod to the challenges that exist around tenancy. Do you think it's workable, and do you expect that will be possible?
Our spokesperson on housing has prepared an array of issues to address the housing crisis, and that's just one. There is an issue about the longevity of tenancies. It's an issue that needs to be addressed, because we're all hearing in our constituencies people who are unable to sign up for any kind of long-term duration in housing, and we find that landlords are selling properties after a year or perhaps two, to give some stability to the market, to give some confidence to the market, and in particular to give some stability to those who are renting. That we'd put in place a regime that would encourage landlords to enter into longer term arrangements, to give some capacity to people to know that they're going to be in a home for a number of years. I think it seems like a sensible measure.
Are the TDs and the Senator, are you all very happy to support Eugene Murphy in office, yeah?
One of my colleagues wanted to discuss it. I mean, I think the party leader has already set out very clearly yesterday that we're not interested again at playing games or any distractions. We can spend 2 nights in here talking about Eugene Murphy's suitability to be in office. That's not going to build any homes. There's a level of political jockeying here by Sinn Féin. I understand that they want to play politics with it. I was taken to some extent by an interview this morning where the party leader failed to address the issue about an inner city homelessness group who have said this is playing politics with a really important issue. It's not going to put a roof over anybody's head tonight. there would be, I think, much better off bringing forward concrete proposals like the proposals that our housing team will be bringing to the budget discussions. That's the way to address the housing crisis rather than playing politics with it.
So Murphy's the best man for the job at the moment. Yeah.
It's not a case of personalities, quite frankly. I mean, this is a housing emergency. We're interested in the solutions, not interested in Sinn Féin-driven optics and the obsession with elections and precipitating crises. It's about getting solutions. So who's in the office is not as important to us, quite frankly, as the correct solutions. And as Deputy Dooley has said, our colleague Deputy Darragh O'Brien is bringing forward through our budget negotiations a package of measures that we're interested in. So the normal sideshow and optics of Sinn Féin that's going on in Cavan does not impress me. The people aren't interested in it. This is a party addicted to media and elections. We are interested only in solutions, not personalities.
Any other questions? Solving the housing crisis. Do you think Murphy is capable of solving?
I think it will take a collective approach from all the parties in here to try and address the housing crisis. It's a very significant challenge. The government have underperformed. They haven't reached any of the targets in terms of coming forward with ideas. They haven't delivered for them. We're not seeing it addressed, and that's something that obviously we will continue to pursue the government. Sorry, next question.
So we need some sort of sláinte care for construction then? Is that the only way they were going to get a solution?
No, I wouldn't accept that. I think there's a myriad of measures, and that discussion begins this week with our housing team together with our finance team in terms of the budget discussions and negotiations. We're beginning that process, and we'll hope to have some outcome when the budget is passed through the Dáil here.
Just on post offices, I mean, there's been plenty of other cases where private members' motions from yourselves or Sinn Féin have been passed with a clause majority complaining about government policy. It hasn't actually changed anything. So will this motion that you're putting forward now change anything?
Well, I'm very hopeful considering the level of outpouring of support, particularly from Fine Gael backbenchers and indeed some government ministers, about their desire to retain post office services in these villages, that this one will be treated significantly differently.
Plus, this is a matter that is going to feature in our budget negotiations.
Yeah.
So instead, if I could just finish this point, instead, and as we see with the Taoiseach on confidence and supply and other issues, being obsessed with his own longevity in the office, what he needs to do is focus on delivering on the housing issues, on the health issues, and as a matter of the rural decline, as Tim has mentioned, in terms of post offices. So the private members' motion will come in due course when our slot comes up. But in the meantime, there are difficult budget negotiations that are going to have to take place, and we expect Leo Varadkar and his team to be focused on those rather than focused on just staying in office.
Conor, I just want to call Conor.
Timmy, what's your reaction to claims made yesterday that Sean Gallagher is the quasi-Fianna Fáil candidate in the presidential election?
Yeah, the Fianna Fáil parliamentary party met to discuss the presidential election. A decision was taken at that stage that we weren't going to field a candidate and that we were going to support Michael D. Higgins if he decided to run. He has subsequently indicated his willingness to run, and that's the party position, and that's how I will be. That's how I will be voting.
Timmy, between 2000 and 2011, there was 720 post offices shut throughout the country. So where was all this concern for Ireland in power?
As you well know, through successive administrations, post offices have closed in locations where the population had deteriorated, where there was no demand, and in many cases when the post office contract was offered, it wasn't taken up by any other business in the community. That has happened for decades. The difference between then and now is that this has been a planned attack by the government and An Post to eliminate a very significant section of the post office network. It is happening in villages where there is a demand to retain the service. So there were post offices that closed in the past where people didn't need the service, where the people were no longer there. As you know, the post office network, there was a post office at almost every crossroads one time. That's not the case because people don't live in that same dispersed way that they did. What we want to do is protect and preserve the post offices in the villages. For sure, I have never said that not all post offices will remain open, and I accept that. And even within this tranche, there are some where there may not be an alternative business to take it on in the community. But the vast bulk of that 159 are in villages where people are living, where there's a demand for the service, and where I think the state needs to step in.
We cannot and would not deny anybody the opportunity to take a redundancy package or to take retirement. But the key issue here, as my colleague Timmy says, is in relation to the communities and the villages and towns that are being impacted. And in those areas where there is still a viable need and where the very fabric of society could absolutely be decimated by not having the presence of any state or any semi-state body there, that's absolutely where we need to focus and to ensure that the continuation of a service is provided there.
The €8 million subvention bill that you're saying now, I mean, all projections have said that the issues facing on buses are going to worsen in the coming years. I mean, is that bill likely to go up, and then how do we control that?
Well, as you know, Post is made up of many different businesses. There's the mail business, which is separate, and there is restructuring going on there, and we'll support that because obviously there needs to be some changes recognising the change in business. There's been a focus now on the parcel delivery business. We're very strong though on the necessity to retain the universal service obligation that the postman delivers to every house every day. That's an important feature, and we will be insisting on and maintaining that, and whatever the appropriate cost is. I don't believe that the cost will necessarily rise. There are numerous reports prepared for and by the government around enhancing and improving the services in those post offices where the population is stronger and where demands can grow, and where there's a need for new services that has the capacity to generate more transactions and make those offices more viable. I accept though that there are some post offices, regardless of what services you deliver, will never be profitable in terms of that viability model. But in those cases you've got to look wider than just the profit and loss in terms of deciding viability. You've got to look at the capacity of the retention of the post office to maintain a service in the village and ensure that there's an appropriate service to the people who need it in that area.
Can I just make the point, adding there to what Timmy has said, remember here we're talking about some vulnerable people, older people, people with disability, who in my area use the post office quite a lot. A lot of them don't have local transport, a lot of them don't have family backup. So I think we are really concerned about this from the prospect of people who are vulnerable, and they are entitled to support and fair play and a little bit of help from whoever's in government, and that's why we're quite insistent that this must be an issue that comes up for discussion in the budget talks that are coming up. And I know that some people in Fine Gael are quite unhappy about this as well. I mean, it's not too long ago since we had a spat between the Rural Affairs Minister Michael Ring and Dennis Naughton over this. So I think this is probably going to be a bigger issue, and the government must approach this, and they must give something to support those people in particularly in some small urban areas as well in rural Ireland, but particularly people in rural areas whom I know who don't have anything but a visit to the post office, and saying that they will have to go to the next post office 15 kilometres away is simply not on for me or from my colleagues.
Surprised you haven't heard from Michael Ring about this publicly?
I think we will hear from him. I think he might be talking behind the scenes about it.
Timmy, can I ask a question? We're several months on now from the abortion referendum. The party obviously was deeply divided on it. What are the considerations? What considerations have been made in terms of the party's image problem, given the fact that so many of your own TDs went against the overwhelming mood of the public? And what will be the message to party TDs at the think-in later this week?
Well, I think we've all moved on from that particular referendum. I think the Irish people have spoken decisively. I think that's well accepted and recognised, and what we're now waiting to see is the passage of the legislation. I think the sooner that happens, the better. I'm really taken by the fact that the Irish people have spoken, but yet women who have to travel for the termination of a pregnancy or require the termination of a pregnancy still find themselves travelling to the UK every day of the week, and I think there's an encumbrance on all of us now to ensure that that legislation is passed through these houses as quickly as possible.
What are the party's image problem, as defined by many of your own speakers?
No, I don't accept that the party necessarily has an image problem. We'll be meeting next week, as you know, for our think-in to plan ahead for the term ahead. We're focused on the real issues here. We're focused on addressing our discussions with the government in relation to the budget around the issues of homelessness, the inability of so many people to get affordable homes, the crisis in terms of the rental sector, and the massive tailback that's existing in our hospitals, and the waiting lists that have absolutely spiralled out of control. Those are the real issues. Those are the bread and butter issues that people are talking about. The image of political parties is always something for discussion, and I'm sure will feature prominently in the colour around our thinking, the thinking of Fine Gael and other parties as well.
Good. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, Mrs.
How are you?
When is that coming in? What? This Saturday.